In the twilight of the ancient world, where the divine and the mortal shared the very air they breathed, the stage was set for one of the most legendary conflicts in human history. This is the story of the Trojan War, a tale of love, betrayal, divine intervention, and the insatiable thirst for glory. But how did this monumental war begin? To understand, we must journey back to a fateful event where the seeds of strife were sown, not among mortals, but within the heavenly realm itself. It all began at a wedding feast, but not just any wedding. This was the grand celebration of the union between Peleus, a mortal hero of great renown, and Thetis, a beautiful sea goddess destined to give birth to a child mightier than his father. On this auspicious day, Olympus glittered with splendor. The gods and goddesses, resplendent in their divine forms, gathered to revel in the joy of the occasion. All seemed perfect, yet among them lurked a shadow of discord. One goddess had not been invited, Eris, the goddess of discord and strife. Her exclusion was not accidental. The Olympians knew all too well her fondness for sowing chaos. But Eris would not be so easily ignored. Seething with bitterness, she arrived uninvited, and with a single act, she changed the course of history forever. Eris stepped into the hall, her dark eyes gleaming with malevolence. In her hand, she held a golden apple, polished to an ethereal shine, inscribed with the words, "To the fairest." With a mischievous smile, she rolled the apple across the table, and as it settled, the air grew thick with anticipation. Hera, the queen of the gods, Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war, and Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, each claimed the apple as rightfully theirs. The feast of joy turned into a dispute of vanity. The argument grew so fierce that Zeus, king of the gods, was forced to intervene. But even the mighty Zeus knew that choosing between these three powerful goddesses could ignite further conflict. In a moment of divine diplomacy, he declared that only a mortal could make such a decision. And so, the responsibility fell upon a young prince far from Olympus, tending sheep in the rolling hills of Troy. This mortal was Paris, son of King Priam and Queen Hecuba of Troy. But his destiny was shrouded in darkness. Before he was born, a prophecy warned that Paris would bring ruin to Troy. In fear, his parents abandoned him on a mountainside, but fate had other plans. The gods ensured his survival, and he grew up with the innocence of a shepherd, blissfully unaware of the role he would play in the downfall of his great city. Paris's life of simple pleasures came to an abrupt halt when Hermes, the swift messenger of the gods, descended from the sky with an impossible request. He was to judge who among the three goddesses was the fairest. Trembling, Paris found himself before the towering forms of Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. Each goddess, radiant and formidable, offered him a bribe, hoping to sway his judgment. First came Hera, queen of Olympus, her voice commanding yet smooth as honey. Paris's heart raced. Next, Athena, the fierce and wise goddess of war and strategy, stepped forward. Her eyes glinted with the promise of triumph. Paris hesitated, overwhelmed by the magnitude of these offers. Finally, Aphrodite, the goddess of love, approached. Her beauty shimmered like 1,000 dawns, and her voice was soft and alluring. And so, Paris made his choice. Blinded by desire, he awarded the golden apple to Aphrodite. The consequences of this decision would soon ripple through the lives of gods and mortals alike. True to her word, Aphrodite led Paris to Sparta, where Helen, wife of King Menelaus, resided. Helen's beauty was renowned across the world, and indeed, It was said that she was the most beautiful woman of her age. Some claim that Helen fell in love with Paris under Aphrodite's enchantment, while others argue she left willingly, driven by a desire for adventure. Regardless, her departure with Paris marked a point of no return. When Menelaus discovered his wife had been taken, his grief and rage knew no bounds. He called upon his brother, Agamemnon, the powerful king of Mycenae, to help him reclaim his honor and his queen. And thus, the call for war echoed across the kingdoms of Greece, summoning heroes and kings to sail for the shores of Troy. As word of Helen's abduction spread like wildfire across the kingdoms of Greece, a fire of vengeance ignited in the heart of her husband, King Menelaus. But this was not a conflict he could face alone. It required the strength of a united Greece. And so, Menelaus turned to his brother, the powerful and ambitious King Agamemnon, to summon the greatest heroes of their time. Together, they would set in motion a force that would change the world forever. With a single nod, Agamemnon gave his word, and his word was as iron. The call to arms echoed across the lands, summoning Greece's most legendary figures to honor their oaths and defend Helen's honor. Across Greece, heroes and kings answered Agamemnon's call. Kingdom by kingdom, they assembled, bound by ancient oaths sworn in Helen's honor. Their faces were fierce, each bearing the weight of destiny upon them. Among these heroes was a man whose name would echo through eternity: Achilles, son of Thetis, a goddess, and Peleus, a mortal king. His skill in battle was unmatched, his power whispered of in every corner of Greece. Yet, his destiny was already written. Achilles knew he would either return from Troy a forgotten man or die in its shadow, his name immortal. Odysseus, king of Ithaca and known for his cunning mind, was a reluctant warrior. He valued his family, his lands, and the life he had built over the glory of battle. Determined to stay out of the war, he feigned madness, plowing his fields with salt in a desperate act to avoid Agamemnon's call. But the Greeks were not to be denied one of their greatest minds. Palamedes, a strategist as shrewd as Odysseus himself, was sent to Ithaca to persuade him. With a trick worthy of the cunning king, Palamedes placed Odysseus's infant son Telemachus directly in the path of the plow. Odysseus's fatherly instinct overpowered his charade. His disguise of madness was stripped away in an instant, revealing his true self. Bound by honor, he could no longer refuse the call to war. The Greek fleet gathered on the shores of Aulis, poised to sail for Troy. Yet the winds would not favor them. Days turned to weeks, the sails lying limp and useless, while tension and frustration grew. Agamemnon, their leader, faced an impossible choice. The seer's words fell like thunder upon Agamemnon's ears. To appease the goddess Artemis and secure a safe passage, Agamemnon was asked to offer a sacrifice, a life most dear to him. His heart grew heavy as he realized the terrible cost: his own daughter, Iphigenia. Iphigenia arrived at Aulis, unaware of the dark fate awaiting her. Believing she was to marry the great Achilles, she dressed in garments of celebration, her heart light with youthful anticipation. But as she stepped onto the sands of Aulis, the truth was revealed, and a silence fell over the gathering. Her bravery touched the hearts of all who watched, and her name would be remembered in legend as a daughter who sacrificed everything for her father and her people. And so, under a blood-red sky, Iphigenia met her fate, and the winds rose to carry the Greek fleet across the sea. With Iphigenia's sacrifice, the gods were appeased, and the winds carried the Greek fleet toward Troy. Aboard these ships, heroes, Kings and warriors stared into the horizon, their faces filled with determination, fear, and the thirst for glory. They sailed toward a war that would test their strength, loyalty, and fate itself. From Achilles, whose wrath would shape the fate of Troy, to Odysseus, whose wit would prove invaluable, and Agamemnon, a king driven by ambition and sacrifice, these were the heroes who answered the call to arms. Little did they know that their journey would be written in blood and fire, their lives forever changed by the unrelenting hands of fate. The Greek fleet surged forward, filling the horizon with sails like a flock of white birds, each ship bearing warriors eager to carve their names into the annals of history. Led by Agamemnon and driven by vengeance, this armada carried the greatest warriors of Greece to the shores of Troy. Troy lay before them, proud and unyielding, its high walls seemingly impervious to the oncoming storm of warriors. The Greeks, brimming with confidence and fury, were met by an equal force from within the city's walls, a force that would prove to be more resilient than they could have ever imagined. The first skirmishes were fierce and unyielding, as both sides fought with desperation and valor. Among the Trojans stood Hector, their prince and champion, a warrior as noble as he was fierce. Alongside him, Aeneas, descendant of the gods, fought with a resolve that echoed his divine heritage. The Greeks were met with a defense they had not anticipated. Hector's courage and Aeneas's leadership fueled the Trojans' resolve, turning what the Greeks thought would be a swift victory into a bloody standstill. As the days turned to weeks, the battles grew fiercer, the stakes higher. Achilles, with his legendary speed and skill, seemed almost invincible, leaving devastation in his wake. Hector, in turn, became a beacon of hope for the Trojans, meeting each of Achilles' advances with unbreakable resolve. Their clashes were as legendary as the gods themselves, their rivalry forged in the fires of war. Each encounter was filled with the echoes of heroes who knew no fear, yet the outcome always led to a stalemate. Realizing Troy would not fall so easily, the Greeks dug in. They built an encampment that became a city of its own, complete with watchtowers, defensive walls, and quarters for their kings and warriors. Days turned to months, and the months turned to years. The Greek encampment grew into a massive, fortified city. Tension brewed as provisions ran low and tempers frayed, yet none could abandon the oaths they swore. Victory or death, they had all vowed the same. Inside Troy, families awaited news of their loved ones on the battlefield. Each day, they prayed for their return, their hope dwindling as the war stretched on. Mothers, fathers, and children lived in perpetual fear, watching their city besieged but refusing to yield. The toll of the war lay heavy on both sides. Greek soldiers, once eager for battle, now dreamed of home, their hearts weighed down by the endless siege. As the war stretched into years, they grew weary of fighting and the death that surrounded them. Each side questioned their purpose, yet pride and honor drove them forward, each man knowing he had no choice but to fight until the end. In the heart of Troy, Hector and Aeneas shared the burden of defending their homeland. They looked upon the Greek encampment, their hearts filled with both duty and dread. They knew that no matter the cost, they would defend Troy to the last breath. As the war stretched into its 10th year, neither side could gain an advantage. The Greeks could not breach Troy's walls, and the Trojans could not push them back into the sea. The siege became a test of endurance, and in the midst of it, the seeds of fate were slowly ripening. As the siege dragged on, a question lingered in the hearts of both the Greeks and Trojans. How much longer could this war last? And at what cost would victory come? Little did they know that the greatest battles, and the darkest betrayals still lay ahead. And so, the siege of Troy persisted, with heroes growing weary, destinies bound to each other, and the fates watching over them, waiting for the moment to strike. This was a war where no side would emerge unscathed, a war that would echo throughout eternity. After years of relentless war, tensions ran high within the Greek camp. Frustration and weariness had taken hold, and even the greatest of warriors could not escape its grip. Achilles, the mightiest hero of the Greeks, found himself at odds with their leader, Agamemnon, a conflict that would change the course of the war. Achilles' fury simmered, his pride wounded beyond repair. Stripped of Briseis, his prized captive and symbol of his honor, he made a decision that would shake the Greek camp to its core. Achilles' rage was matched only by his resolve. No longer would he fight for a king who disrespected him. His warriors, the Myrmidons, would stand idle as the Greeks struggled without their greatest fighter. And so, Achilles withdrew, leaving his comrades vulnerable on the battlefield. Without Achilles, the Greeks faltered. Wave after wave of Trojan warriors, emboldened by Hector's leadership, bore down upon them, driving the Greeks back with devastating force. The cries of wounded soldiers filled the air, and Agamemnon, too proud to seek Achilles' return, watched in dismay as his forces suffered. The Greek lines wavered, their spirits crushed beneath the weight of Achilles' absence. Agamemnon had never anticipated the toll Achilles' wrath would exact upon their army. Seeing his comrades fall, Patroclus, Achilles' beloved companion, could bear it no longer. He approached Achilles, his heart heavy, pleading with him to put aside his pride for the sake of their friends. Patroclus's courage stirred something deep within Achilles, yet he remained resolute in his choice. Reluctantly, he handed over his armor, sending his friend into battle in his stead. Clad in the armor of Achilles, Patroclus fought with a fire and resolve that lifted the Greek spirits. To the Trojans, it seemed that Achilles himself had returned, striking fear into their hearts. Under Patroclus's lead, the Greeks rallied, driving the Trojans back from the ships and reclaiming lost ground. Yet his bravery would come at a heavy price. In the heat of battle, Patroclus found himself face to face with Hector, the mightiest of the Trojan warriors. And in that moment, fate stood still, waiting to deliver its cruel verdict. Hector, realizing the truth, struck Patroclus down. As the young hero fell, his last thoughts drifted to Achilles, his friend and brother in arms. His death sent ripples of sorrow through the Greek camp, a loss felt by every soldier who had fought by his side. The news of Patroclus's death shattered Achilles. He blamed himself for the loss of his friend, the one who had been his closest companion, his truest friend. In that moment, his pride was no longer important. Only vengeance remained. Grief transformed Achilles into a force of nature. He donned new armor, forged by the god Hephaestus himself, and prepared to face Hector in a battle that would shake the very earth. As Achilles returned to the battlefield, an aura of wrath and sorrow surrounded him. Even the bravest Trojans trembled at the sight of him, for they knew that nothing could shield them from the fury of a grieving Achilles. Hector, noblest of Troy, accepted his fate with dignity. He knew that Achilles would come for him, and that this day would be his last. Yet he would meet his death as a hero, facing his enemy with honor. The battle between Achilles and Hector was one for the ages, a clash of the greatest champions of Greece and Troy. But in the end, grief and rage fueled Achilles, and he struck Hector down, avenging Patroclus. Hector's death was a victory for Achilles, yet one that brought him no peace. For in taking vengeance, he had lost a part of himself that would never return. The war continued, but the sorrow within Achilles' heart was a wound that no amount of blood could heal. And so, the wrath of Achilles burned on, consuming everything in its path. Yet even as he claimed victory, the weight of grief lingered, a reminder of the price of pride and the sorrow that war leaves behind. The war had stretched on for years, but the fate of Troy now lay in the balance. After the death of his dear friend Patroclus, Achilles had returned to battle, his heart filled with fury. The Greeks surged with new hope, while the Trojans sensed the coming end. And then came Achilles, striding like a storm across the battlefield, his armor gleaming, his face twisted with anger and loss. The two champions, the greatest warriors of their time, stood face to face, a clash of fate, of vengeance, and of sorrow. With a final prayer to the gods, Hector faced Achilles, knowing this was a battle he could not win. The two warriors clashed with a fury that shook the very earth. Spears flew, shields splintered, and swords clanged. The gods themselves watched, for this battle would change the course of history. But Hector was no match for Achilles' wrath. After a fierce struggle, Achilles struck the fatal blow. As Hector fell, Troy's hope dimmed, and the Trojans felt the weight of their coming doom. Blinded by rage, Achilles dishonored Hector's body, dragging it through the dust as the Trojans watched in horror. Achilles' vengeance knew no bounds, and with Hector's death, a part of Troy's spirit was shattered. The gods, who had watched the war unfold from afar, began to intervene more openly. Some, like Athena and Hera, supported the Greeks, while others, like Apollo and Aphrodite, sought to protect Troy. Though mighty Zeus himself held the scales of fate, even he could not prevent what was destined. The destruction of Troy was fated by forces even the gods could not resist. In that moment, Odysseus, the cleverest of the Greeks, devised a plan that would become legend. He proposed a ruse, a gift so irresistible that the Trojans would welcome it within their walls. The Greeks worked tirelessly, constructing the towering wooden horse, a symbol of cunning and deception that would be forever remembered. With the horse completed, the Greeks set their trap. Leaving the horse outside the gates of Troy, they sailed just out of sight, their warriors hidden within the wooden beast. Believing the war was finally over, the Trojans rejoiced. They brought the horse into their city as a symbol of their triumph, unaware that their end lay hidden within. But as night fell and the celebrations quieted, the true nature of the horse would be revealed. Under the cover of darkness, Odysseus and his warriors crept out of the wooden horse. Like shadows, they moved through the city, opening the gates for the Greek army, which had returned under the cloak of night. And so, in the dead of night, the Greeks poured into Troy, their swords flashing, their war cries echoing through the sleeping city. Troy, once a proud and mighty city, was consumed by fire and blood. The Greeks showed no mercy, razing Troy to the ground. Warriors and civilians alike fell as the Greeks exacted their vengeance. As dawn rose over the smoldering ruins of Troy, the world beheld the aftermath of the war that would echo through the ages. Once proud walls lay shattered, the remnants of a civilization lost to time and fate. But though Troy itself had fallen, its stories, its heroes, and its tragedies would live on. In the wake of Troy's fall, the fates of the surviving heroes would be marked by sorrow, vengeance, and for some, a search for redemption. Few would find peace, for the gods were far from finished with them. The greatest of the Greek warriors, Achilles, would meet his end not on the battlefield, but through the whim of the gods. Paris, with Apollo's guidance, fired the arrow that struck Achilles' only vulnerable spot, his heel. Thus fell Achilles, the warrior unmatched in battle, his legacy forever entwined with the tale of Troy. For Agamemnon, leader of the Greek forces, homecoming would bring not peace but betrayal. His wife, Clytemnestra, harbored a dark hatred for her husband, fueled by the sacrifice of their daughter Iphigenia before the war. In his own hall, Agamemnon met his end at the hands of Clytemnestra and her lover. The very family he sought to protect had become his undoing. But from the ashes of Troy, a new journey was born. Aeneas, a Trojan prince favored by the gods, escaped with a handful of followers, carrying with him the hope of his people. Guided by his fate, Aeneas's journey would lead him to the founding myths of Rome itself, as told by Virgil in the Aeneid, ensuring that Troy's legacy would be carried on through the Roman Empire. The story of the Trojan War left an indelible mark on the world. Homer's Iliad preserved the epic struggle, capturing the valor, passion, and tragedy of heroes like Achilles, Hector, and Odysseus. Through Homer's verses, the Trojan War became a symbol of human struggle, the tension between honor and vengeance, love and war. Later, Virgil's Aeneid would connect Troy's fall with the founding of Rome, forging a bridge between two ancient civilizations. Odysseus, the clever Greek king whose plan ended the war, embarked on his own arduous journey home. In Homer's Odyssey, his 10-year voyage serves as a tale of endurance, wit, and the longing for peace after the horrors of war. Virgil's Aeneid reimagined the tale, casting Aeneas as a hero destined to escape Troy's fall and found a new city. In doing so, he united the Greek and Roman worlds, linking the fate of Troy with Rome's rise. Why does the story of the Trojan War endure? Is it the heroism, the clash of gods and men, or the price of pride and love? Perhaps it is all these things, woven together in a tale that mirrors the struggles of every age. Through the ages, the Trojan War has reminded us of the glories and sorrows of human ambition. The beauty of Helen, the pride of Achilles, the cleverness of Odysseus, and the loyalty of Hector. Their stories remind us of who we are and what we can become. And so, as long as people tell tales of bravery and loss, of love and betrayal, Troy will never truly fall. Its legacy, captured in the hearts and minds of those who hear its story, lives on. For as long as there are stars in the sky, the story of Troy will continue. A story of gods, heroes, and the timeless dance between fate and free will. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey through the fall of the Trojan War. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more legendary tales from history and myth.